Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of Understanding Our Founders' Constitution. There's been a lot of consternation as of late, that's been building for quite some time, over the extent of the powers that President Obama is executing in the office of the president. He has, for several years now, talked about how if Congress doesn't do what he wants done, or how he wants it done, or when he wants it done, he'll do it without them. He's made the almost smart alecky phrase, I've got a pen and I've got a phone, meaning I'll call somebody up and tell them this is what I want done. If they don't do it, then I'll just use my pen, I'll sign an executive order, and I'll issue this as an edict anyway. And he has used the different departments in the executive branch of government to also do similar things, of course, at his behest or at his direction, because, as Harry Truman said, the buck stops with him. That is, all these executive departments are under his authority and his control, and if he doesn't want something done, all he has to do is tell them, no, you are not to do this, and they're to follow his dictates, his direction. Therefore, anything that they do, um, whether it is legal or illegal, or whether it is within the scope of their authority or not, if he does not put an end to it, it is by his authority from a complacent viewpoint. And so when we think about what all is going on, we have to ask ourselves, what is the authority of the president according to the Constitution? What is it that he is really supposed to be doing? And the article that deals with the executive branch of government is found in Article 2. And it has only 4 sections, and they really don't detail a whole lot about what he is to do. It does some. But if we take the things that he is expected to do, contained in sections 2, 3, and 4, then we could sum them up into 5 categories. And it starts out in section 2, stating that the President shall be the Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navy of the United States and of the militia of the several states when called into the actual service of the United States. It goes on and talks about what he may require of his subordinates. But obviously, his first and primary duty, since that's listed first as the Commander-in-Chief, would be to do what? Why do we have a military? What is its purpose? The purpose of the military is defense. We are not a imperialistic nation. We do not seek to go out and establish an empire like, say, the Romans did, or the Greeks before them, and the Persians, and the Egyptians, and the Babylonians, the Assyrians, and all the other ancient empires before them. We don't do that. We have a military solely for the purpose of defending ourselves against attack and from those who would seek to do us harm, who would seek to destroy our society, destroy our liberties and our freedom. And so we find, therefore, that the very first thing right out of the box, he is the Commander-in-Chief. That's what his primary duty is, to protect us. It goes on, though, and talks about how he has the power, with the advice and consent of the Senate, to make treaties, provided that 2/3 of the Senate concur, and that he appoints ambassadors and other councils, and that he receives ambassadors from other countries. And so here, the second broad category in which the president is to execute his office is in international relations. Again, it makes sense just as it does in the military. You can't have several chiefs trying to run the show, as they say. You've got to have one person who's going to give the overall direction and strategy, and then those subordinates in their different areas of authority and obligations and responsibilities carry that philosophy, that agenda, whatever you want to call it. They're the ones that execute it and carry it out. So it is then when you're dealing with other countries. You can have several people interacting with other countries and maybe giving conflicting information or negotiations. You've got to have one person directing how all that is done. That then is the duty of the president. But in addition to appointing ambassadors, he also is to appoint judges and other members of the executive branch who are to answer to him, as we might call it, their cabinet members. And of course, it has to be with the confirmation and agreement by 2/3 of those in the Senate. There are times at which he is to interact with Congress, and that is to give a State of the Union address. And it doesn't say it has to be annual, it just says he has to do this in Section 3 from time to time. But that's a minor thing. The main thing that he does when it comes to the legislature is to sign laws that they both pass, both the Senate and the House, that is. And not until he signs a bill that both have passed does it in fact become law. And in that way, he becomes a check upon the power of the Congress, as he has the power to veto. It then takes a two-thirds majority in the House and in the Senate to override his veto. So he serves as a check against them by his power of the pen. We talk a lot about the House of Representatives having the power of the purse, meaning they control the budget, the expenditures, that no monies can be drawn from the Treasury and spent without its consent. So then we could say that the President in the executive branch, he has the power of the pen to ward against encroaching power of the Congress, the legislature, upon our freedom and our liberties. And that once those laws are signed and they become law, or I should say once those bills are signed and they become law, he then is responsible for enforcing them. And that goes back to the oath that he is to take upon his ascension into the office. According to Section 1 of Article 2, before he enters the office, he shall take the following oath or affirmation. I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. Executing the office, if he signs a law, he is then to see that the laws are faithfully executed. And therefore, when they are not faithfully executed, that failure, that responsibility, lands squarely at his feet. Hence, Harry Truman's saying on his desk, the buck stops here. And so when we see a president refusing to enforce the laws, we see then a president who is failing to fulfill his oath, to faithfully execute his office. And we have seen this numerous times with this president. He has failed to execute the laws because he does not like them. The Justice Department has failed to properly enforce the Voting Rights Act. There were voters in Pennsylvania who were intimidated by members of the Black Panther Party several years ago. Nothing was ever done about that. And yet we have several amendments in the Constitution that talk about people having the right to vote. One of the amendments that was passed following the Civil War to ensure that the newly freed slaves could have the right to vote, Amendment number 15 states, the rights of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. Then in 1920, the 19th Amendment was added. The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. Congress shall have the power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. And then we come over a few more amendments later, Amendment 24, the right of citizens of the United States to vote in any primary or other election for president or vice president, for the electors for president or vice president, or for senator or representative in Congress, shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or any state by reason of failure to pay any poll tax or other tax. Section 2 of that amendment states that Congress shall have the power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. And then finally, Amendment 26. The right of citizens of the United States who are 18 years of age or older to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of age. Again, the Congress shall have the power to enforce the article of appropriate legislation. And so we see we have a few different voting laws that have been passed, and the president has refused to see that they are properly enforced. He has selectively enforced the parts of it that he wants, that might be to his political advantage, and has done so arbitrarily and capriciously. Now, the question comes, as I was asked just recently, what about his recent claim that he, if need be, will initiate reform or immigration reform of our immigration system, and grant amnesty to millions of those who have come here illegally? Can he do that? No. We have immigration laws that are on the books, and he, again, is failing to enforce them. He does not have the authority to legislate or to make regulations or laws to suit his political fancy and purposes, but instead, he is to enforce the laws that Congress has passed. Congress has passed laws of immigration. They're on the books. If he doesn't like them, that's too bad. It is his responsibility to enforce them, and he's not doing that. And now we have the latest thing. I was asked a question recently about his dispatching of several thousands of our troops to Africa in order to combat the Ebola virus. And the individual asked me, does President Obama have the constitutional authority to do that? And is that the use and purpose of our military? As I've stated, the purpose of our military is to defend us from invasion or war. They are not medically trained. They are not to be sent to fight viruses. They are to fight enemies who, by force, want to destroy us. This is not the purpose of the military. Now, can he deploy the military to do something such as this? Constitutionally, I would say, as far as I can tell, he can. He is the commander-in-chief. The only thing he cannot do with the military, and according to the Constitution, is to send them into combat without a congressional declaration of war. That comes from Article 1, Section 8, which talks about the Congress shall have the power to, and it lists all these enumerated powers that it has. And one of them that it says is to declare war, grant letters of marque and reprisal, and make rules concerning captures on land and water. The President does not have the authority to put our military into a combat situation unless we are attacked and there is no time for him to go to Congress, get a formal declaration of war to respond to that attack. Most of our wars lately that we've been involved in have not been of that nature, and so it is necessary that he get congressional approval to do so. But if he wants to send our military into some sort of a humanitarian role, and presidents have done this over the years, when some countries in the Pacific are hit with a typhoon, we have sent some of our carriers over there because they have these huge desalination equipment on board to help provide fresh water to those people. And being Americans, that's what we do. We reach out and we help people. But this is not the purpose of what our military was designed to do. And though he may constitutionally do so, it does not mean it is the wisest thing to do. As a matter of fact, there are several experts in the area of both medicine and in the military who have said this is a dangerous thing to do and that we should not do it. I would encourage you to look up an article that was in the WorldNet Daily just recently, in which some of these individuals were quoted as stating that it was dangerous, it was irresponsible for the president to do this. But it makes him look good. But we leave our border open and unprotected so that terrorists can come across that border and threaten to do us harm, which is something which is directly involved in his responsibilities that he refuses to do, and yet he sends our military off to do something for which it was never designed or intended to do. And so, yes, this is what our president is expected to do. Defense, international relations, certain appointments, judges, ambassadors, other executive officers, signing laws or vetoing laws as a check against the legislative power encroaching upon our freedom and liberties, and once those bills are signed into law, enforcing them. And that is all that we expect him to do. And in all of that, we expect him to act in compliance with the Constitution, which he has sworn to uphold and defend. And that's a brief summary of executive power according to the Constitution. So with that, I'll wish you a good night and a pleasant week.